One, it's Justin McAdam. I'm the chair of the Express Unit Appeal Board. Officially call this meeting to order. Recognize that you have a quorum. Posted notice of this meeting in accordance with open door law. As we do every time, we will take public comment today. I believe we have not had anyone indicate that they are interested in providing public comment today, but if you are, please send a message to Pete. We will move to that here shortly. I do want to acknowledge the meeting we had last week in the city of Gary. I found it to be a very informative and productive meeting. I appreciated all of the feedback and the comments that we received as a board, and say that we have worked to go through those comments and compile a list of action items and follow-up items for this board, things that we need to engage with the school corporation on, engage with others in the community on, and invite other members of this board if they have action items or items that they'd like us to follow up on, to please share those with Pete and I so that we can add those to the list of things to do. We will, as relevant, we'll work to provide feedback and updates on where those things, on actions that result from that. But many of the things, I think it's safe to say that we take action on, you may not hear about, but it doesn't mean we haven't heard you and we haven't considered those comments, and we haven't followed up on them to see that things are being conducted in the way that we would expect them to be conducted, and that we aren't moving forward on the path that we want to move forward on. So just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that, and again, thank everyone who came out there. Really appreciate that engagement. It's very helpful for this board. And I want to thank the team from the school corporation for being there, participating. It's an important part of the job. So with that, do we have anyone to provide public comment? To bluff a little longer here. All right. So, with that, we'll move on. We did have a robust amount of public comment last week, so our first item of business, we do have a fairly short agenda today, and so we'll move through it rather quickly. Our first item of business is an update from the executive director on a contract that he has approved since our last business meeting. That's been provided in your packet, but I'll let Pete take a moment to walk us through that.
So last meeting, there was a contract that you all approved. Online students, they were the recipient of grant, but they were school system take care of payroll, so forth. And as a result of ending up that there's a contractual relationship with them. This is very similar, although it's a different grant. That grant was for after-school tutoring. This grant is the federal Department of Labor, focused on the workforce, and students focused on the middle high school for pathways, multiple kind of pathways. During this after beyond total, and so.
Questions for Pete regarding the contract? Thanks, Pete. Next item on the agenda is an update from the manager. Dr. Volpe, I understand, is otherwise engaged today and unable to join us. Nobody's going, or is she on the?
I'm here.
All right. All right.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Okay. Yes, I didn't drive down today because I had some meetings, but I definitely wanted to participate in this meeting and give you a couple of updates since we met last week. First and foremost, I wanted to congratulate Miss Dana Evans. She's a Westside graduate. I know I've mentioned her before, but she is one of the teammates who just recently won the WNBA for the Chicago Sky. And so that's obviously something we want to celebrate and honor. She is planning on coming to Gary next week on October 27th, and we are definitely planning on having a celebration to honor her and her jersey here at Westside along with the city. So we definitely want to say congratulations to her, and it's a wonderful thing that she's a Westside graduate, so nice job. We're also having a trunk or treat event this Saturday at Westside for all of our students who wish to participate. All of our elementary schools will have cars. We're going to have a parade outside, and parents and students will be coming so they can safely do a trunk or treat in the parking lot. We have the fire department and the police department that are also coming to participate and help us with handing out candy to our students. So we're excited about that. Also wanted to remind everybody that the Lew Wallace demolition does start November 1st. We will be there on the grounds. We have been sending out mailers to the community members, postcards, and have many signs out. We are, just to answer that question that was brought up last week, we are having a pallet or two of bricks that will be removed, and they will be here at central office, and we will be sending out mailers, flyers, robocalls, sending out through all media aspects on how people can obtain those bricks. They're not for sale. We'll just be giving those out to anybody who's interested in a memorabilia brick from Lew Wallace. I also wanted to mention that we had homecoming last week, and it was a huge success. Our football team won their game, so congratulations. The homecoming dance was fantastic. The gym looked wonderful. The students looked great, behaved themselves well. We want to have lots more events for them, so they did a nice job. And the Spirit Week, they did a great job decorating the hallway. So last week was a huge success for our Westside students. This week we've had our instructional coaches participating in the SMECNS training, so they can become trainer of trainers for our school district and for teachers, and that is helping to enable them to become more intense training on that 90-minute reading block that we've instituted K through 12. So that's happening this week here in the district. Kids also participated in the SAT last week. We have approximately 28 students that participated in the scholarship fair with the Urban League this week, so we're anxious to hear how that goes for them. We also participated district-wide in the Bullying Prevention Month, and every school participated and had activities planned within their school, and they were neat to see. I went around and actually judged many of the contests that were happening. Kids did a great job. And then lastly, we did partner with the Gary Literacy Coalition, and they are coming out to our school district next week from 9:30 to 10:30 at all of our schools for K through 2, where they'll be doing reading and reading intervention and passing out books to our students. So we've had a lot happening here in the last couple of days, but I wanted to share the updates since I saw you last. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Dr. McNulty. I do, one of the items that we heard about a lot last week, or last Thursday, had to do with some of the security issues or the fighting issues that you've had at the district. And I know that this week you were, if I recall, you were going to be virtual for this entire week. Can you speak a little bit about how that's gone and where things stand?
So students come back, it's only been at Westside that happened. And the students come back to school tomorrow. We've been working with the Westside High School staff all week on setting up different procedures with a group of parents and students. It's gone extremely well. The staff's very energized and ready to go for tomorrow. So we feel very confident that we're prepared for students tomorrow.
Could you talk a little bit about, with the 4 days that we've had, what you've been able to accomplish in that time, what you've been working on, so that a little more detail?
Sure. So we've put in place some extra procedures for some of our special education students who had some behavioral challenges so that they could have some more support. We've also put in some more procedures as far as safety for check-in and check-out procedures in the morning for students, hallway procedures. We've also put in the lunch clubs during the lunch 45-minute block. I think I've mentioned that before, that we felt like that was too long, and that's where we've had some of our problems throughout the day. So the students and staff helped us organize and set up many different rooms now around the school so that during that lunchtime, students can go to designated places after they're done eating or even while they're eating, so they can participate either in tutoring, a gaming club, an athletics participation. There's about 15 different options that the students chose that they were interested in. And so we've had to take this last couple of days to get those rooms set up and get supplies ordered and get them ready to go so that they have And they have positive things to do during that lunchtime.
Great.
This is Rebecca. I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Do we have, or do you have at the school, some sort of mechanism where a student can call a secure number or website or email or something that if they see or hear that a problem may be occurring, that they can sort of be proactive and let you or the school community know to maybe avoid something happening?
Yeah, we have a bullying line, and we also have an email. So we do have both of those mechanisms, definitely. And we have had students take us up on those, which is a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question. In your assessment, and this is Eddie Melton, is there a need or will there be a need for any additional resources? I know in the meeting we had a couple of months ago in Indianapolis, I mentioned the opportunities through Homeland Security that schools across the state have in terms of applying for grants. I believe that can be used for personnel. It can be used for other technical assistance, technical components in schools. Has that come up?
Yeah, we did apply for all of those grants, and so we have received some of those grants, and we're still waiting to hear back on the others, but we did apply for all the grants that were available for us.
What would they be used for? Do you have an idea?
We might use them for extra metal detectors, definitely for extra security officers, because it allows you to use those funds for those. And it's not so much the funding, it's finding those personnel. That's what the difficulty has been.
Last question in regards, whatever steps or mechanisms that's going to be put in place because of the safety, how will this be communicated formally to parents and stakeholders in regards to the measures that's taken? Is this going to be a memo that's going to go out? How are you going to update the general public?
Yeah, good question. So we're having meetings at every single school. We've had the principals already set those up. I have actually a meeting tomorrow already set up as well. We'll be doing it through memo, through meetings, through robocalls, again, through all of our outlets that we can, but we do have in-person meetings set up at every school.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Dr. McNulty? Right. Thank you, Dr. McNulty. Look forward to seeing you next time. Our next item of business is a consideration of the 2022 Gary Community School Corporation budget. Roll.
Thank you. So I am presenting the LTF 2022 budget for this next upcoming year. This is for our property tax funds only. So this is not a district-wide budget and such as for those specific funds. I wanted to do something a little bit different in the budget presentation. I did prepare some booklets for everyone today. Specifically, you guys are a little bit more familiar with the forms and the process for submitting the budget, but there's actually some newspapers on the left-hand side of the packets that I wanted to spend some time reviewing. I thought it was important in our last public hearing that we did have on the budget on October 8th. There were some questions and comments from residents, and then with our last meeting that we had in Gary as well, I kind of feel like it's important to be as transparent as possible and address some of those questions specifically. So I wanted to take, some time to really review that as we approach the budget as well, and then if there's any specific questions on the forms. So in those loose papers in the binder, the first paper is just our advertisements, or our notice to taxpayers of the budget for 2022. As I stated, we did have our first public hearing on Friday, October 8th, and then we will have our public adoption on the 25th. The next paper is our budget submission comparison. So this is what we're requesting for 2022, including the budget amounts and our estimated tax levies for the year and how it relates and corresponds with years past. So this year for our debt service fund, we are requesting approximately $16 million. For our education fund, approximately $44 million. In operations, $18 million. And referendum, $12 million. And then you can tell that we also have our net circuit breaker and our limits on this. So hopefully that gives a good side-by-side comparison of how things have changed over the years. Recall last year in our operations fund, the DLGF did reduce our appropriations rather significantly because of the cash balance we had at the time of applying for the budget. In June of 2020, when the budget was prepared, it's really looking at that 18-month cycle period. So the deficit in operations specifically was $1 million. So this year, when we went to prepare these forms, the deficit was only $2 million. So it definitely gives us an increase in appropriations in that operation fund, which goes to show that we're trending in a positive manner. The next page is just the DLGF maximum levy calculation for 2022, which is approximately $28 million in our operations fund, and our state growth quotient was about 4.3%. And then the next page is a summary of revenue and expenditures. And this relates to a question we received in public comment during the hearing as well. I wanted to kind of put something together of where we are with our budget in 2021 and where we are as the first 10 months of the year in those expenditures and how it compares to what we're requesting for our budget of 2022. So there are a couple footnotes. I wanted to kind of go over those. Included in the tuition support basic grant budget request for miscellaneous revenues, we have calculated about a 6% increase, and that was effective for FY22. And then FY23 will be a 3% increase in our basic grant. That was the major increase in the revenue portion for the education fund. If you recall, last year we did request a similar budget in education of over $40 million, and it was reduced just from sufficient funds, which is a normal process. Usually your budget, you ask for the stars, and you may get a little bit less than that. So again, we're asking for a budget of $44 million, and I'm expecting a slight reduction just based on estimates of miscellaneous revenue. So we should be more than adequate within that range. And then our debt service. One of the footnotes is for actual year to date, we've only made our first June or July 1 payment on our debt service. So those payments get made twice a year, either June or December or July or January. So depending on when those dates of payments are made, that's the big discrepancy in the year to date actual, that we've only spent about half of what our levied amount is because we've only made one of the first two of the debt service payments.
Well, those two payments essentially the same.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, they may slightly differ just because of interest.
Sure.
And then moving on to our operations fund, one of the footnotes is that item D, which is the DLGF reduction in appropriations. I mentioned that earlier. We did get a significant reduction in appropriations because of those cash balances in operations. So we only had a $5 million actually approved budget for this current 2021 school year. It's very hard to operate a school system on $5 million. So we, have those additional revenues like transfers, the 15% from education into operations, help to relieve that fund as well. And then the footnote item E is showing the significant increase in our appropriations that we are asking for because we now have corrected that deficit. Specifically in the operations fund rather significantly, so that made a positive effect and their increase in appropriations. And then for our referendum fund, we did receive a larger than expected first distribution of our spring referendum money. So because of that, we are allowed to request a higher budget amount in the calculation of that 18-month cycle. So we're anticipating that instead of that original 8.9 budget, because of the higher collections, that we'll be able to request more of a $12.5 million budget. Sure. Absolutely.
Is that going to, I don't think it will, but correct me if I'm mistaken, that should not be substantially different from what was advertised during the referendum. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. So it doesn't affect in terms of any increase in what the taxpayers are paying.
Thank you.
It is merely just because of the collection rate, we are receiving more money than anticipated based on the levy.
Just wanted to, I thought that was the case, just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And then the next question, or sheet rather, I'm sorry, these are specific questions that were asked at a public hearing, as well as the meeting that we just had last week. And I did, when I'm preparing this, I also posted these on our website too.
Quick question, is kind of hard to hear just a little bit.
One of the things that they brought up was during the pandemic, $3 million or plus was spent on maintenance and building, cleaning facilities and things. Could you address that? Why there may be continued expenses during the period of time?
Sure, absolutely. So I mean, if I'm answering your question correctly, just even though the schools were still closed, we were still distributing just with children as well, our staff, the cleanliness of the buildings, any sort of repairs that were done at that time. All of those are still general operational expenses. You still have your utilities, lights. We still have staff in the building in some cases. So just our normal general maintenance expenses still have to be.
Yeah, it was just one of the questions asked that, hey, there's $3 million here. Why is there still an expense even though the kids weren't at school? And then at the bottom of that page, could you maybe address the difference between the budget amount for the extracurricular, safety, athletics, arts, so 7.4 million, the transfer number of nothing and now 5.4.
Sure. So the only referendum money we've actually spent to date is the first $1 million as promised for our teacher raises that began effective in January. It's about $83,000 a month gets transferred from the referendum to the education fund to provide for those increases. So there is a small monthly transfer that's being made at the referendum fund to help support the reduction in appropriations in our operations. So that's really the only movement of those funds. It's also a necessary tool because in this budget process, if we did not show transfers or expenditures to the referendum fund, then we would have had less appropriations being requested for the future year. So it was a necessary feature in the budget process as well to have those funds being transferred in that fashion. But there are no items that have necessarily been spent as of yet. We have committees that are in place, and we're trying to make the best decisions as a district of how to utilize those funds along with all the other funds that we've received, whether it's federal or 1065 or things like that. So we do have plans to spend that money. Those are kind of in the works, but the expenditures have not been booked as of yet.
But the 5.4 million was transferred out in the actual year-to-date budget and to
support the reduction in operations appropriations.
So you transferred it to operations. That reflected in a transfer. See.
It's so no, because this is just necessarily showing the specific line item expenses and the estimated revenue. So it's not it's on your cash flow worksheets that are presented. You'll see the transfer items on those month-to-month cash flows. So you would typically see it in that revenue line item. It would be other transfers, but this revenue line item specifically is only showing what you've collected in property taxes for your levy. So it's not a complete revenue picture. It's just very levy.
So this is just.
It will show, however, in your budget packet in the miscellaneous revenues, you'll see the transfer line item in that miscellaneous too.
Senator Belton, I think you had a question.
Yes, couldn't hear a lot of it, but in terms of the collection rate, I was just trying, what was that percentage of that collection rate of property taxes?
For 2021, we don't know the full collection rate yet because we're still waiting on our December disbursement. Historically, for other funds, debt service and operations, it can be anywhere between 75% to 90%. But we don't have any information on the referendum fund because that's this.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So the questions that I wanted to kind of focus on that were asked at the public hearing, one of them being, what were the changes in expenditures and receipts from last year's budget to this year's budget? Again, this information responses are posted on our website as well, and we're going to try to come up with a way to have this information available to the public that may not have access to the technology through mailers or things like that as well for brainstorming those. But to answer that question, last year's approved budget and expenditures of our levy funds were those amounts, but I just wanted to highlight the variance between the two of them. So our referendum fund, we are asking for an additional $3.6 million in appropriations to be spent. And again, that's because we collected more than originally budgeted for in that fund. Debt service fund, 2.6 million, education fund, 9 million. Again, that for 44 million will probably be reduced because of miscellaneous revenues. So operations fund 13.5, and again, that's because we are able to get much more additional appropriations because of that deficit. The receipts and miscellaneous revenues are estimated on the budget form too. Some of those major changes, again, include that 6% tuition basic grant increase. Next question we received was the capital project plan that's listed with the budget documents is different than other capital project plans found online, and there are some items that are missing or different. So the DLGF does require that we submit a capital project plan as part of the budget process, but this capital project plan usually has a threshold of items or expenditures over $10,000. Also, it's as it relates to the capital items that are being paid for budget appropriations that you're requesting. So our situation is a little different in the sense that we can relieve our budget by not having those capital appropriations included in them. So submitting this capital plan is really a formality of the budget process, but instead we have other avenues like the 1065 and ESSER funds that we can pay for those capital items. So we do have a larger scale plan through ESSER and 1065 that are online. So you'll see a slight discrepancy on something that was paid for time period versus a 5-year. And then lastly, I think another important question that we received was, various schools has received millions of dollars in COVID funds. We should no longer have any financial issues. And I think this is a great question and a comment, and something definitely we need to address. So hopefully this explanation will help. The COVID relief funds, such as ESSER, are restricted funds that cannot be used to pay off debts or correct deficit fund balances. These funds are reimbursable through pre-approved federal expenditures once the improvements and fixtures have been purchased. ESSER budgets have to be submitted for prior approval to those expenditures being paid so that the purpose of those funds are allowable costs. Such allowable costs have to meet certain criteria. And while we have received a substantial allocation of those federal funds to be encumbered over the next couple of years, these funds they will assist in relieving some of those appropriations, but it is not a complete financial solution to any unit of government, us as well. So again, all this information can be found online. So I'm not sure if you guys wanted to go specifically for my form or had any other questions as it relates to those required aid.
The questions for Nicole regarding the budget? Sure.
Nicole, it's obvious that that service fund needing additional levy and additional. Your cash flows indicate that the levies and money's going to be there as increases are needed across all the next 3 to 5.
Yes, our debt service fund will be more than sufficient to pay all the debts that are required. I believe in the last meeting, you did ask what our common school loans were, and what portion of that as it related to our other long-term bonds. So we have about $75 million of principal that's due, a little bit less, in totality of all of our long-term debt, and about 1/3 of that is the common school loans that have been suspended, so approximately $25 million of that.
Yeah, I got that information. Thank you for providing that. Appreciate it.
Also, another important thing to note that a little bit of the change in the debt service is we are requesting and wishfully thinking that our unreimbursed textbook funds will be much larger this year, and that is because we are now able to allocate the technology portion of the textbooks that we previously had not done. So all the price of the Chromebooks, hotspots, those type of figures for each student, we can allocate that in the formula for unreimbursed textbooks. So that amount did increase significantly.
Would you explain to me what unreimbursed textbooks mean?
Sure. So because of our status, I guess, as free and reduced, our school corporation, we are allowed to have a certain percentage of the funds that we spend on any curricular items, and also now this new technology, to be reimbursed through the state based on this formula of our ADM and our curriculum cost. So it's an allocation figure, which I think now we will have much larger allocation than.
Okay, because I took it as a liability, but it's more of an expense.
It is. It is something that you have to incorporate as an expense into your debt service, only because it is then transferred into your curriculum textbook fund.
Okay.
In your overall.
And then you're reimbursed. Okay.
So it's an in and out.
Thank you.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Miller.
I think you mentioned 25 million in terms of the common school loan debt. I thought it was higher than that.
So there's a portion of common school loans that we do currently pay for, but the portion that is in suspension, the principal is $25 million.
How much is the principal that you're still paying? You know,
For the suspended portion or the unsuspended?
unsuspended.
It's about $10 million. There's 40 million in long-term bonds and leases.
So the suspended loans, the 25 million, those are the special common school fund loans that be awarded through this board with the Board of Finance to support payroll and other operational expenses earlier in this engagement. Is that correct? And then the 10 million is traditional common school fund loans that every other school corporation has access to and takes advantage of from time to time for specific purposes.
Correct.
Is that the breakdown?
Yes.
Okay. When do you expect to submit your budget to Wes and his team at DLGF?
So after our public hearing, the last formality is just signing the ordinance, and then that will be scanned and all the documents can be submitted on Gateway next week. And I believe the hard deadline is November 1st. So
5 days after you're done.
Other questions for Nicole on the budget?
Yes. That public hearing date has been set.
yes, so the public hearing is at 9 a.m. at Westside on Monday, October 20th.
Okay, Nicole, thank you very much. Presentation. Thank you for addressing some of the questions that came up last week and before. Our next item of business is an update really on the ESSER plan. This is a work in progress still. These are the dollars that came as part of the American Rescue Plan Act and other acts related to the pandemic that provide additional federal funding to school corporations to allow them to address a number of different needs related to the pandemic and arising out of that situation. Eric, are you presenting that plan to us today?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as Justin said, this is a next iteration in a working document. You recall back in the summer, I believe it was the June meeting, we presented the first iteration, which was the framework for ESSER spending. Talked about, the document at the time talked about what is ESSER, and ESSER has been the nomenclature now for the stimulus funds that all roll together. ESSER. How much we had anticipated that we would receive, and then the categories are for how that money is spent. Since then, we've updated it with some specifics of what we actually have received and will receive. And then we put numbers into those 5 categories. So just to refresh, those categories are instruction, technology, facilities, equipment, and temporary personnel. So phase 1, first iteration, was that framework. Phase 2 is today, where we have detail and data to submit. And phase 3 will be not far behind phase 2. Phase 3 will be more of a control and monitoring. So once each of these are set, then the next phase will be ongoing documentation that shows how we anticipated spending the money in these categories, and then how we actually spend the money. One thing to note, this truly is a living document. There's even non-facilities related contracts will change in price and scope over time. Personnel costs will change in scope over time. And so we will show what we estimate, and you can see that estimate throughout this document. That will change, and we'll account for that. Not only what the estimate was, and then what the actual was, and why that was. So not only would the same good or service change, but it change the good or service along the way. Anticipate that one. As a reminder, DOE is the approving agency for the ESSER plans. It's similar to the title process. Those documents are submitted and subject to amendment, and just like title. Expect that one. What's unique is that DUAB has a responsibility and to approve specific spending. So anything over the dollar threshold for the executive director will come from the director. Anything above that threshold comes to. So it's going to be a 2-layer authentication process. It is an integrated process. We talked about that in the document, that we don't view ESSER dollars as standalone, that we look at title, the school improvement fund for facilities. We look at operations. We try to take a holistic approach rather than just look at ESSER as a standalone. So decision making flows through. It's in that context rather than. In your document, you'll see it's on page 5 of the document, page 32 of we show the estimated dollars by category. What I want to highlight there is that even though we have 5 categories, instruction, technology, facilities, equipment, and temporary personnel, really all 5 of those are instruction. That even though it may be labeled technology, or everything really does relate to instruction. Instruction is called out separately for some obvious reasons, but everything that's not instruction by title really does conceptually roll into that as well. Also, one of the 5 categories is temporary personnel. Temporary may not be the right term, but it's deliberate that we are very much hypersensitive in fact that ESSER dollars one time, once in a lifetime type of stimulus money that's going to flow into the district. We want to be very careful not to create a situation that's not fiscally sustainable. So even though it may not be the most accurate term to say temporary personnel, chose temporary to denote that these are long-term sustainable personnel costs. After those 5 categories of the dollar amount split out by ESSER 1, 2, and 3 in a total to see the percent. Each of those. And then following that are some representative examples for each of those 5 categories. Instruction, you'll see the term allocated and unallocated. Instruction is by far the largest components. And Nathan, when I'm finished with my comments, will jump in and talk about the consortium that the district is part of and why a lot of those dollars are still unallocated. It's a work in progress that we're getting close to the end, but we're right in the middle. And then for the other categories, you can see some of those dollars have been spent under technology, Chromebooks and hotspots at the beginning of the pandemic, so they're remote learning. The next set of dollars that will go to technology is to enhance our infrastructure. Now students are back in the buildings, there's an overload, and to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place, not only person that remote event. And you can see examples of facilities and equipment. Under temporary personnel, some of those categories include extended school day, summer school, City Connects, which is a program that participated in counselors and stipends. See how those are really instructional based that fall under our personnel package. Nathan will talk about the consortium. Skipping ahead to, that's Appendix A. Appendix B is a document you've seen before. It's just layered in some additional data on this bill round. What we've done is take the capital spending, facilities mostly related, and we've differentiated the funding source for school improvement fund, which is also a limited funding source, ESSER, and then a little bit of title that you're spending. Other would be the options fund. We don't show that yet. That'll be a future iteration. We'll integrate all of those different operational type of capital type of spending. This will show you by major capital, right, and then by building, how those ESSER facilities dollars are planned, spent. We use that term very just like the school improvement fund, we'll be back with updates and we'll be spending and scope. Ask Nathan to jump in and talk about the consortium, which is how it came to be, and then how it is shaping how we're spending those instructional dollars.
Thanks, Eric. So, as an example, if you want to go to Appendix A in your packet, this is a recent exercise that we did with Educational Resource Strategies, which is the DUAB assigned technical assistance partner that has been very helpful to help us frame what we want to use the ESSER funds for, so that they're bold, innovative, impacts-driven, and so on. So that appendix has one of the recent activities that we did as a group. It's not just Gary, it's a couple other region school districts that are all bouncing ideas off of each other. To allude to what Eric said, we have to make sure that we're investing in items that are proven to make a difference, while not also committing ourselves to something that's not sustainable long-term, that exacerbates issues that Nicole just presented. So we have to have a huge focus on the academics and improving student outcomes, also doing it strategically. So this document helped us think through what are those ideas, and then if we do invest in ideas that aren't going to need to go away in 2 or 3 years, how would we save money to pay for those? Or many of them are capacity driven. So we've talked about this in previous meetings of increasing capacity to then improve student outcomes. So for example, improving the quality of our teachers. Once those are fully licensed and trained up, then we don't have to spend that money anymore. So this is a work in progress, as Eric mentioned. We should be done by December with that vendor. So after December date, we should have a very solidified ESSER 3 plan that fully allocates every penny of that money. But right now, what we presented to you at least has allocated a good portion of the funds on pandemic-related items and facility items that we know now, plus some of the other things that you all have already approved, the extended school day, the stipends for the extra work, and so on.
So with that, when do you expect to look at that to see sort of the final iteration of this plan and be able to review and
I would say at the January board meeting, your contract with the TA vendor ends in December. So, we could provide a plan to you now, but we wanted to go through that process with the TA vendor because one, it was offered, which is helpful. And then two, we are making substantial progress about things that are budgeted in ESSER And we want to make sure we get this right. We don't want 3 years to come and go and we say, how did we spend that money? Did it really make a difference? So the intent is to say we need to pick the most evidence-based, impact-driven solutions so that, data for kids improve. The silver lining to this, the pandemic was obviously terrible in many ways, but this gives us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have a huge investment in areas of need.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Senator Melton, go ahead.
And again, I might have missed some of this with difficulty hearing. But what is the total funding of all federal dollars related to the pandemic? And the second part of the question is, when is the clock run out on those dollars having to be spent, not just allocated?
Yeah, so in total, there are 3 ESSERs, and in the packet, it lays out the different numbers. It is a visual that's helpful, Senator Melton. It's on page 32 of the packet.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. I just requested that it be resent to me. So
yeah. So roughly $72 million across all 3 grants. ESSER 1 is essentially exhausted. We had to use that really to open up school. ESSER 2 is good through carrying out activities through September 30th of 23, and we have to spend the money by December of 23. And then ESSER 3, which is the largest pot of money, which is roughly $46 million, is good to carry out activities through 9/30 of 24 and liquidate or spend through December of 24. That sounds a far ways, but it's not. To spend that kind of money and the runway to get it going, that's why we do have a sense of urgency here to make sure that the plan is ready to go.
And really, what
Thank you.
we've talked about in terms of presentation and review is really that ESSER 3 category, because that's where you have the most discretion. It's by far the largest chunk of that. ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 were fairly limited activities, if I recall. You had less discretion in how to spend them.
And with ESSER, I would say definitely with ESSER 1. ESSER 2 and 3 were definitely flexible, but you're right, ESSER 3 is over 2 times the amount. So the most attention there and the most unallocated, we've really obligated or planned for ESSER 1 and 2 at this point.
Yeah. One other comment, Mr. Chair, if I know by state statute, it's not a requirement to provide this update publicly, unlike the budget, right? But if you're going to have the community's attention captured while you're presenting the budget, I would do 2 other additional things. One, give an update on the ESSER funding, and second, the referendum funding. That's just a suggestion I would throw out there, because that was a lot of questions that was asked during the night of the hearing. And if you're going to have the captured audience of the community on a fiscal aspect, I would add those to the agenda as updates. So just some suggestions. And if it's not finalized, at least giving some type of where we are today and when we plan to have these things ready to be shared further down the line.
Yeah, I would add, Senator Melton, we did do a public survey to gather feedback from the community regarding the ESSER funding. And the feedback very much aligns with what we presented to you. It's helped us drive what we're using the funding for. So we did do a public engagement. But as we continue to do other things, ESSER has been there's been the opportunity for individuals to give feedback, but at least formally, we've had a couple formal options where we've gotten, I think, those.
I'm thinking on the back end, where the money goes. That's not how it comes in. And so what I.
And I get it. I understand all that. I guess what I'm trying to communicate what I heard the other night was that a lot of folks wasn't aware of certain meetings of those discussions publicly. So yeah, I think it's an ample enough time since folks know, especially after today, if there's coverage on this, that there's going to be a public meeting about the budget. I would plan to additionally add that other data points on those other issues. So that's all I'm saying.
This is Rebecca. I have a question along that same vein. Of the surveys, what percentage did you get back? Because that would indicate how many people actually responded or even know what's going on. And I kind of agree that the number of people that responded to a survey compared to the number that you sent out is important in terms of how many people actually had that information.
Yeah, so the survey was posted on our website, so how many people had the access, and we shared it out directly to families. We did have a couple hundred people respond, which anytime you put out a survey that's not required, it actually was a decent response rate. But we have engaged the community several times on how we are using the ESSER funds. We've been working with, the teachers union, the ministerial alliance, questions about it have come up at the referendum meetings, and we've explained how ESSER funding is different than the referendum. So we put stuff on the website. So we have done several different types of engagement because we know not everyone can come to a formal meeting, not everyone's going to read the survey, and we've tried to get the word out. A lot of it too is we're responding to how DOE has helped us guide the use of the funding. You heard last month Dr. Flores say, how are we going to make a difference with the data that was up on the screen? And we're directly responding to that so that we are increasing student outcomes. So we do want community input, but we also want the evidence to drive how we're using the funding.
Yeah, I think I'd echo what Senator Dalton is saying. I think what he's trying to communicate is communicate often or lean towards over communication here. I think, it was pretty clear from the meeting last week that people are hungry for this information and they're wanting to know more about it. And so, I think every opportunity you have to communicate that. Budget hearing is a natural place to talk about the finances and the total picture of money that you have. I think it's a great opportunity to lean in and share some of that information that you're ready to share, recognizing that we're not all the way to final.
Right. And I would add to that, and that's accurate, Mr. Chairman, the question of, is this a public meeting or is this a virtual meeting? What's the format of folks engaging in this process? So what is the format? Is this like we had it the other night where the district is going to come before the community and present the data with actual numbers and the presentation? Or is this something virtual where they can't ask information? So what's the platform? What's the format?
Cool.
Yeah, in terms of our budget hearing, it was held in person at Westside, so there was an opportunity for the public. I believe we only had 4 attendees at the time. Public questions are a little bit harder to answer directly during that type of a meeting, usually because they're asking for a little bit more of an in-depth analysis that I may not be able to, immediately provide an answer. That's why I felt like it was important to address some of those questions tonight. And I do want to reiterate that we are trying to find a way to, reach the community who can't find these things online or, look things up on our website or other different avenues, but we can send a mailer or a postcard that has this information to the homes of our students or parents so that they do have that information. That's definitely something that, you know, we're brainstorming what's the best way to get that out to everybody so it reaches the community.
Right.
The meeting next Monday on the 25th, will that be virtual or will that be?
No, that is in person
That
as
is in
well.
person.
Yeah, the DLGF required that. I think all of the budget meetings were in person this year.
Will people be able to ask questions at that meeting, or is that just a presentation of the budget?
It's really just a formality of the adoption. There won't be necessarily any public comment, but I will be more than glad to, you know, stay around for anyone that comes and has any specific questions. I can do as best as I can, but it's really just the actual adoption of the ordinance.
So that's final action.
You may want to take an ad out in certain publications or do PSAs on the radio that'll play not just during one particular show. I know you guys have a show that Dr. Minotti goes on. Like we mentioned before, the better, the more often. I think that'll be extremely helpful. It'll show the public that we heard them, or that you all heard them at the hearing. That going above and beyond, letting them know here's an opportunity to get engaged. Here's an opportunity to learn about these issues on the financial side of things. So, you know, take an ad out in the Gary Crusader. Take, you know, get commercial spots, WLTH. You know, public. This is really public service announcement, so you probably don't have to pay for that. So just, you know, you can send them to my office with the information. We can email it out. Probably all of the legislators. So there are ways we can get this information out. So happy to help any way I can.
As we think about the different aspects of the plan, what's the federal funds overall on this biggest tranche here? What are we trying to accomplish? Tell us, give me your 30-second elevator pitch. What are we, at the end of the day, what do we hope to have accomplished from here?
Start to go and go from there. Springboard off of the new laws as quickly as possible to accelerate what we were doing before COVID, accelerate that as much as possible. Two answers.
Yeah, you know, as we shared last time, we know we have to improve student achievement. So this is a silver lining. We're able to invest in things that are going to move that faster. So, for example, you've improved curriculum, we've extended the school day sustainably, so ESSER's going to help with that, but we're going to build up term. Improving the capacity of our teachers. So we have to have the best teachers in the state, and we're getting that with spending a lot of money on getting them properly licensed. And so the end game is that we're going to have these student performance. So even though we're spending a decent amount on facilities, they're all things that are tied to. So for example, fixing a roof doesn't sound like it's very exciting, nor is it going to increase student achievement. But fixing the roof at Westside is opening up science labs. It's opening up classrooms that we then can, you know, have, you know, a space if kids are getting upset, they can go in there and calm down, and then we don't have some of the issues we've talked about earlier. So it alone, you know, at one of our elementaries, the gym, you know, making it accessible again. So all of those things play into increasing student achievement. So the investment in facilities are with that in mind. Increasing athletics, we know that that when you offer great programs, kids come. They may come to play baseball, but they're gonna, you know, learn, and they have to go to the school to do so. So ESSER has really helped us more flexibly use the 1065 funds too. To really have a range of making the school a more attractive place to be, a safer place to be, and more intentional and focused learning to occur. So, yeah, I would say the student achievement numbers is how we're using, and how the federal government says that they want the money to make a difference too. That at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if kids aren't learning.
there a specific percentage amount of ESSER funds that you must use to loss?
Yeah, so ESSER 3 is a 20%, to go far beyond that.
You gotta keep separate track of the costs that you're using. So,
Yeah, so actually DOE is forcing us to, forcing, asking, telling. But yeah, the way that we submit our budget for ESSER 3 had to break it down. Learning loss, accelerated learning, academics, and then everything else. So based upon, what our needs are, we believe that, well over 50% of the funding, not 20, is going to be focused on things that directly relate to increasing student learning.
When we think about that learning loss, what are the big components that are tackling it?
Well, to be honest, we weren't in a good place before the learning loss occurred. Some districts had very strong scores in the learning loss, then they've got to catch up. We needed to address what was there even before that happened. So a lot of it, extended school day that's going to add 2 years worth of education to the kids. Summer school, when you have properly licensed people, can make a big difference. Mental health, the pandemic has been hard on all of us. And the mental health needs, building partnerships, training of teachers, because, we're not just here for math. The kids have to be comfortable and ready to learn too. So we've been ramping up counselors, social workers, mental health opportunities, improving curriculum. So again, we've got to have, a mechanic that has the right tool to fix the car. We need properly licensed teachers that have the right curriculum to get the outcomes that we need. So right now, within the ESSER 3 budget because we already had returning the 20% to the state. So the things that address the 20%, the extended learning day, the summer school, the new curriculum, as well as improving teacher licensure. Specifically special ed, dual credit, high ability, English learners, areas that our students are in higher need, or more stringent licensure requirements that we got to get there.
How much do you think we are able to sustain after the federal dollars run dry? I know you guys are confident you can sustain the extended day. What else do you think you can sustain?
Yeah, so, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be dominating here. Extended day is going to cost us about $3.5 million. And our Title I budget as a whole is over $6 million. And historically, most school districts use Title I to pay for extra teachers. Gary is fortunate to just have the classroom teachers filled, besides having extra teachers that we could use as Title I. So we really flipped the model to say, instead of hoping that these extra licensed teachers are going to make themselves available, which they have in the past many years, let's just have our current teachers stay longer. So our model of providing Title I is legally and formally addressed by extending the school day. So the $3.5 million is going to be a permanent fixture of that $6 million. And then school is the other aspects. When you talk about addressing learning loss, a lot of it is how can we address it before it even becomes a loss? And so having kids ready to go to school when they're 5 years old is important to changing the cycle of where we are. So extended school day is a permanent fixture. We can afford it. We're going to pay for it long term. The other things, let's get our teachers up to snuff with licensure. And then once they are, we don't have to pay for it anymore. A different activity, we're partnering with University of Indianapolis for CEL to improve our dual credit programs so that eventually Westside will be a dual credit high school. So kids can get an associate's degree while they are getting their high school diploma. Once we get our teachers up to performance, and then the state actually incentivizes and gives extra money when we hit those targets, we just haven't been able to hit those targets because we haven't had the capacity. So a lot of it is investing in capacity that we know we won't need the money anymore once we're up to that target is where we're trying to design the dollars.
mentioned summer school too. You see that as a sustainable.
Yeah, so Nicole and I spend a ton of time this summer on, the state puts out summer school dollars. And Gary had not done a good job in its past decades of using that money. So we put forth a pretty robust plan. It was the longest summer school Gary had ever had in length of days and length of time. And I don't know our number yet of reimbursement. I should know it soon. But, you know, possibly $500,000 is going to come back to the district because we're saying, how can we take advantage of what's already there for us? So summer school should be a, you know, a pocket that
We jumpstart with the federal dollars and continue with the state dollars that we have.
Yeah, I think the operational issues of, you know, school districts that are under, you know, control for various reasons, it's not just the teaching and learning. Operationally, they've struggled applying for grants. We're hoping to announce we just got a second grant for after-school program. We wrote and we got $700,000 for more after-school programming. So we have been trying to go after every dollar that exists. So the dollars that we already have as guaranteed can be used rather than having to.
Question, Mr. Chair.
I'll take Paul and then Senator Mel.
What point during the remote learning process, Representative Smith said there was an excess of 30% truancy rate? They didn't want me. What is the truancy rate? And assuming that contributed to learning loss, how do you address that?
Yeah, I think the number was closer to 22%, and unfortunately, that number was not a whole lot different than what a lot of school districts saw during e-learning, which is why we wanted to come back as soon as possible, because it is more difficult to engage when you're not seeing kids every day, and other related services that you can get for them. So it definitely was a driving factor to come back in person full time. Our virtual school now, you know, is very limited in enrollment because we don't want to have kids that are doing it that were truant, that weren't signing in. For now, with our kids in person, you know, having those extra counselors, those attendance officers, making phone calls, the attendance has improved, but it is something that Gary still struggles with. And it's a community issue of trying to reinforce coming to school on the first day of school and coming to school every day.
We still above 15%?
Well,
Where we at?
yeah,
The only reason I ask is we can increase all the summer programs, increase the day longs, you know, the days of
Right.
school. But if the kids aren't there, that learning loss is still going to continue. So it seems that we need to address why the kids aren't better.
right. So the 15%, 30%, we were talking about kids that just weren't engaging at all, like that had just stopped in many ways, and trying to get them to come back. Now, the kids that we have, you know, they are coming, it's just needing to increase our attendance rates. We do have higher than average state chronic absenteeism. You know, and the state defines that as, I think, missing more than 18 school days a year. And so we do have 2 to 3 times the number of students than what the state average is. But all of these things that we're doing, so kids are coming, we just need to make sure that they're coming forward. So everything that we're doing of having quality programs, having after-school programs, quality athletics, you know, better teachers, more teachers, you know, all of that plays into kids wanting to go, and that is going to help turn around. We agree with you. You know, you can't make all these improvements if you know kids aren't in seats.
Senator Belton.
So we've talked about after school, talked about extended days. Any conversations around summer learning programs, credit recovery programs, things of that nature that can continue to engage students that may or may not return, right? That you're trying to identify to get back into the district. That's the first question. The second question, which doesn't necessarily have to be answered now, but just more food for thought. Are there any state policies that you feel that may be a deterrent or a hindrance that we should consider visiting to help provide more flexibility to teachers and curriculum? And I'm solely focused on the academic aspect, nothing financial, but have there been any conversations on what can we go to the state to pursue legislatively to give more flexibility, give more options and opportunity on the academic fronts? So just throw those two questions out there.
Right. So, yeah, first piece I would say is credit recovery. Yes, we had actually 2 summer sessions for high school, and I was trying to look up the number so that I could say it exactly, but I was pretty proud of the number of credits that we had. But we do offer credit recovery and students this summer. I would say it was over 1,000 classes that we had kids get their credits. I know it was a really high number, and we were proud of that. But yes, we do offer credit recovery. We have an alternative school structure, not school nor program, for kids who may not have come during the day because maybe they are young parents themselves or they're working, but we still want to get them through high school. So we are offering those other types of creative options. Flexibility, I'd have to get back to you. It's, I think we are given quite a bit of flexibility now. It's just taking advantage of that and using it. But Senator Mellon, if it's okay, we definitely would get back to you on feedback regarding that question.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks.
Other questions regarding the federal dollars and trying to spend them? All right, we look forward to the next update. We'll look for you in January. See that plan in full. All right, we need to jump back to the budget item. I overlooked the need to vote and approve the budget. We hate to have come all this way not to have actually approved it. Wes will be unhappy with me if I didn't. So we heard the budget. With that, I would entertain a motion about approving or the adoption.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we would approve the 2022 Gary Community School Corporation budget as presented at today's meeting.
Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Joyce,
Yes.
Mr. Baki,
Yes.
Mr. McGatty.
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
Unanimous consideration. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, could you include me in any discussion with Senator Melton regarding flexibility and those kinds of issues? Maybe need to change legislatively. I'd be glad to be a part of that discussion if possible. Thank you.
Yes, we'll do. Our next item of business is a consideration of a contract by GCSC involving Wi-Fi access points. It's a contract with Insight. Nathan, are you presenting that or Nicole?
I don't know.
Okay.
So last month, you all approved several things regarding upgrading our technology, the wiring, the nuts and bolts pieces. This is similar to that. Prior to the pandemic, Gary was not one-to-one with devices. Because of the pandemic, we had to shift to that, and now we're taking advantage of it. But now that all these devices are back in the building, we've got some dead spots and some slow spots that need to improve. So these are those little small things that hanging from the ceiling that make sure that the Wi-Fi works effectively in every room, so that kids can take advantage of the good technology that we have. So this would be a device and subscription for the access points.
How did we settle on this?
So we did, our IT team walked around. Really, the feedback came our way because when a teacher's devices don't work very well, they make it known. So it was a pretty easy fact-finding area that, once all of the kids have been back, and how slow some of the devices have been. So really using our internal staff, but also letting, teachers would give us feedback on where. So we're really getting to what would be an industry standard number across our 10 buildings so that it works effectively.
Doesn't some of the material in the building have an effect? Steel, it's concrete, signals have to go through factors. What kind of testing did you do? It's good to get the feedback from the teachers.
Yeah.
And the users, but what did these companies do to come in and say, okay, this is definitely a hot spot, or maybe there's a hot spot that nobody's used recently that might need to have a hot spot?
Yeah, so this project really works in tandem with the one that you all approved last month, because, improving the wiring so that, because my cell phone doesn't work in certain sections of the building, you just can't get cell phone signal. So yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it definitely works in tandem so that, we're not investing in something that doesn't matter. But yeah, we really relied upon internally our IT team.
They developed a comprehensive and overall plan of the different needs and how, so it kind of stems.
Is this a fiber network? Hardline network? Or just or they just strictly Wi-Fi?
So the access points are, the project last month did have wiring.
Okay.
And so on. And then
So
this,
it's kind of 1A and 1B here.
yeah, they definitely go in tandem. So when possible, they're just going to pick up the previous signal and throw it further. But there are hardwired concepts and UPSs, and I try to act like I know what I'm talking about here. I'm doing my best. But yeah, our IT team has done a good job of putting it together and gathering the data so that Nicole and I can help pay for it and get the contract. You're going to ask me any more IT questions. I might struggle.
There's one lifeline.
Yes, it's like I may call if they get any harder.
Other questions regarding this contract? All right. With that, I would entertain a motion.
For inside as presented. And they funded $492.
Motion, is there a second? Motion and second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, you can call roll.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Bach,
Yes,
Mr. McAdam,
Yes.
five, sir.
Approval. Okay, before, I know during the meeting, Representative Smith asked if he could provide some comments to the board, and as is our custom, we always like to hear from our legislative members. And so with that, we'll turn to Representative Smith.
All right, Dr. Smith, you should be able to be heard now.
Okay, you're able to hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Once again, I want to thank all of you that were able to attend our the DUAB meeting that was held in Gary last week. I really appreciate your presence and your participation. Hopefully, I think you would have heard the overwhelming sentiment of the constituents of the affected area. I just want to make a few comments that I needed to reiterate again so that we can get some feedback, because many of the residents felt like questions were asked and no answers were given. Before I do that, you talked about the ESSER plan, using those COVID dollars that were allocated. I was a little disappointed just to hear that you're using your website for Gary Community School Corporation to contact the public. I think Senator Melton has brought out more effective ways of doing that. But I think you have an access to almost every parent via the students. One of the things I did as a practicing principal was to send out survey information or notices to parents through the student body. You know, some of the high school students will not cooperate with you, but most of the elementary and the middle school students will cooperate with you, and that's a better way of reaching out to the affected population. And so I think we need to look at the mediums that we're using for outreach, and certainly radio station PSAs, as was mentioned, and through our weekly news papers are better ways to reach our constituents. I also want to mention that people are concerned about the extended school day. We know that from today that learning loss and credit recovery is part of it, but I think people want to know specifically, not that you just have an extended day, but what are you doing differently in the extended day? What services are being provided? What are you doing differently to reach those students that are in need of the extended day? They also want to know if it's mandatory or if it's optional. There's some confusion on the part of the community concerning that. But I also like to indicate that I've had grave difficulty hearing any of the presenters. I even had difficulty hearing some of the board members. There were only a few that were clear. And I think that Senator Melton has referred to that, but you know, you discussed the URSA plan and I couldn't hear any of it. I wanted to take notes, was prepared to do that, and couldn't take anything down because I just couldn't hear it. And I have my computer up at the loudest volume that I can get it. Want to remind the community wants a transitional plan. A question concerning that budget was, is there a line item in there for the superintendent? Because the superintendent is still permissible in the school corporation. And is there a line item in there if the DUAB board hears the community and begins a process of getting a superintendent in place for transitional purposes? And we still want to know a plan for the use of the referendum dollars, and also the common school fund that we now have access to rather than paying our payments. So those are things that I had some concerns about, and I'm going to write all my questions that I brought up at the last week's meeting, and hopefully I'll get some written response so I'll be able to provide it for the community. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share. I should have been here at the beginning of the meeting. I was a few minutes late because I was out working with one of my students who's a teacher in a school at Glen Park Academy, and so that's where I was for a moment. So, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it always.
Thank you, Representative Smith. I will say, we are having some technical transitional difficulties, and we are going to work on for the next meeting, ensuring that people are able to hear us, duly noted on that point. And so bear with us, and we will hopefully iron that out by the next meeting. I will say, and you might have missed this at the beginning of the meeting, but I took detailed notes. Myself, Pete, and other board members, detailed notes regarding the comments at the meeting. I don't, that forum, I don't know, it's the best forum to have a Q&A and engage in answers at that point. But what we have done is compiled a list of what I think were the predominant concerns. I had many overlap with your list here and many others. And we are working in the process of following up on many of those. Not prepared to share anything today. And some of those may just be discussion items that we have with the district themselves, but I think there are others where it's appropriate to return and provide some sort of public response, and we are working towards that. So stay tuned for that. We do plan to follow up on many of those questions that were raised at that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate all of it.
Welcome, and appreciate you welcoming us and continuing to press us on those things. It's helpful to have your voice for the community.
Thank you.
Is there any other new business to come before the board today? All right. Well, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.